Okay, we are live. This is September 26th, 2025. It is the Prospect Weekly Roundup. We do this every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. And with me this time on the Roundup is our staff writer, Whitney Wimbish. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm doing good. How
Yeah,
are you doing?
there you go. It's a loaded question these days.
Yeah.
Um, So uh, I apologize for putting you in that position. So anyway, we are going to talk about some of the great pieces that came out in our print issue, our October issue, which we're rolling out this week online and should be at your doorstep momentarily if you're a subscriber to our print edition. And the cover story in our print issue for October was written by Whitney, and it is a wild and woolly trip to Wyoming, the equality state, the smallest state by population in the Union, but one that has hit on I guess I would call it a get rich quick scheme for its state budget. And it is rooted in the promise of the crypto industry. So I guess we should start by just asking the question, Whitney, crypto, is it a great technology or the greatest technology? Which one of those do you
Oh, pass. Um,
think? You got to add one. You got to answer one.
oh man, I'm just gonna short out for a second.
Right, exactly.
If you canvassed the people who were at that conference, they would go with the greatest ever. They were so enthusiastic. They were really confident. They were so confident that they let me come to their conference. Um,
Right. So we should mention what this conference was all about. So tell us where you went and what you were witnessing.
so, well, you sent me a Slack message that said, I think something like, I should make you go to this conference as a
Something like
joke.
that. Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I'm going to show him. I'm going to email them right now, and they're going to say no, and then I'll get a different assignment. But they shockingly said, yes, you can come. Um, and my brain kind of shorted out for a second
Right.
because why would they let us do that? I don't know. Um,
And
and
what's the conference?
the conference is, yeah, I guess that would be important.
Yeah,
It's
right.
the Wyoming Blockchain Symposium 2025. It's a conference put on by Anthony Scaramucci's SALT conference outfit that he runs. Um, he
And
packed,
Scaramucci, he was the White House communications director under Trump one for about 10 days.
yes, for a quick second, and then he kind of went up in flames. And that was something actually that when he took the stage with Eric Trump,
Mm,
Eric Trump brought it up as a joke. He was kind of like, well,
right.
you're much better at this cryptocurrency thing than you are at politics. And he kind of like, he was like twice his
Uh-huh.
size and huge and kind of like loomed over him and hugged him. And
Well, Scaramucci is a bit of a wee fella,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
even if he was kind of like, you know, 5'9",
He would still be
he would still be
dwarfed by
dwarfed
the
by this guy.
immensity of Eric Trump, who
Yes,
was the
he was
president's
very
son.
tall.
So yeah, so in addition to Scaramucci and president's son, who are we talking about? Who was at this conference?
Oh, so the conference was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Right.
And it was held in Teton Village, which is kind of the spot where all of the wealthy vacationers go to go up and see the mountain and go to,
Hmm.
you know, trail rides and hiking and things like that. It's a really fancy spot. It was so fancy that I met a local reporter there whose boss also sent her to this thing,
Yeah.
and she was sleeping in her car for the duration
Oh my goodness.
of the time because the hotels were so expensive, even an hour away where I was staying. Um, so
Hmm.
she was just gonna rough it. Um, So it was in the fancy Four Seasons Hotel. And the folks who were there were kind of these luminaries of the venture capital and cryptocurrency
Hmm.
world. So there were people from different startups, people from the venture capital kind of hedge fund world. And then there were a bunch of political figures, folks who either wanted to get into politics and, like run a campaign where cryptocurrency was part of what they were campaigning on, folks who were already established, and then people who worked for regulators. Um,
Hmm.
so it was a mix of all the powerful people in our country coming together to party and celebrate and um, kind of, I don't know, just really pat themselves on the back for what the administration is doing now, which is just shoving cryptocurrency into our financial system and making it sort of more of a centerpiece than um,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
should.
We should talk about sort of this sea change in crypto. I mean, obviously, in the 2022 to a lesser extent, but really in the 2024 elections, crypto got very involved in spending money, both in primaries and in the general election, in an attempt to essentially buy Washington. And where they were getting a lot of flack from the SEC, from other regulators, and some politicians in Congress, their attempt to neutralize that was to essentially buy the town out. And they were pretty successful. They won a lot of races
They were
and
really
got
successful.
themselves in a position to have a working majority, essentially, in Congress. And then with Trump, who was actually in his first term kind of against crypto, he said he didn't see the use case for it. He was converted opportunistically, and became someone, a real lover of crypto. And then, a mogul himself, who's, mentioned Eric Trump, the Trump organization, which he now co-runs, has a number of crypto businesses, all sorts of everything from a Bitcoin mining operation to a stable coin that they've put out to this thing, World Liberty Financial, which has other crypto businesses like meme coins. There's a Trump coin. And so the profit, I mean, I've seen one report that something like 30% of the Trump family's net wealth is now because of crypto. So you put that all together, a Congress that is lined up behind crypto and a president that's literally profiting off crypto. And you have the makings of an industry that's going to get whatever they want. And the first thing that they got was this legislation called the Genius Act. Now, tell me about that.
So first, I want to say that it's not just lawmakers that they have sort
Yeah,
of in their pocket. It's also the Securities and Exchange Commission, which
right,
was
sure.
a major target of the whole crypto industry because Gary Gensler, the former chair,
Right,
was even though he taught a class about cryptocurrency and like he's very like knowledgeable and he's not somebody who just was like, we can never talk about this. Um, they really didn't like him. They didn't want cryptocurrency to be regulated as a security
right.
under the SEC. They wanted cryptocurrencies to be regulated under the CFTC, which is what they're going to get with the new guy at the SEC, Paul Atkins, who launched Project Crypto, which is it is a regulatory framework to allow cryptocurrency to
Right.
flourish.
And Atkins has some crypto experience in his background, and that's part and parcel of you get the right president. The president appoints the right person who's going to be friendly to your interests. So moving sort of main oversight of crypto from the SEC to the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, much more friendly to the industry historically, friendly to every industry historically, and just has far fewer resources, which I think is the kind of operative point here. that wouldn't be able to really appropriately regulate any industry, let alone crypto. That's the focus of future legislation on market structure that is currently working its way through Congress. But the previous legislation, the first thing sort of crypto won
Mhm.
in their attempt to buy Washington, was this thing called the Genius Act.
Right, and that creates a regulatory system for stable coins, which is it's a type of cryptocurrency that is ostensibly pegged to the dollar, so it's not supposed to
Right,
ever, be 99 cents. It's supposed to be a dollar in, dollar
right.
out. And that is it's something that is like every time I think about it, I just think like you keep telling me it's useful, but it seems like a lot of hops to, like buy, like groceries. Like I have to buy the stable coin,
Right,
the place I'm going to shop at will accept. And then
right.
I got to take that and buy whatever I'm going to buy. I don't get it. Um,
The idea, I
like
guess, is
right.
that digital assets are very volatile. And so if you have something that has a peg, then it has a certain value. We already have something that's pegged to the dollar. It's called the dollar. So the idea that this would help in the real world is a little bit ridiculous. I think the
But
idea,
also promising something is going to always be pegged to the dollar. We've already seen that just not
oh,
work
it's failed
with the money
every
market
time.
funds. Like
It's
there was a
also
giant lawsuit about that
It's also failed with
in
stable coins,
2021.
right? I mean, we have
Yeah,
Tether
yes.
and Circle and some of these other stable coins that have lost their peg. But the idea clearly is so that you can trade more crypto, right? It's so that you have a stable asset that you can say, okay, this crypto is worth this many stable coins. And so then you can facilitate that crypto trading, and that's really all it's for, right?
It's
It was just
also
to facilitate that.
It's also a marketing tool.
Yes,
Like places that offer a stable coin can say, look at us, we're very modern, we have this stable
right,
coin and you should buy it.
right.
It's called, Dayen bucks or whatever. That's the
Hey, good idea.
that's that's
Prospect
the
bucks,
tap.
I think, is what
Yeah,
we'll end
tap
up doing.
bucks.
Yeah, tap
But
bucks, man.
uh, Wyoming is the first state in the union to launch a stable coin of its own.
Right,
Um, and, they say that it is supposed to, that it is going to generate surplus that will be used for the education system. And I ran this by some workers who said, first of all, they'd never heard of that. They had just,
yeah,
they had no exposure to any information about Wyoming stablecoin. But then when I said, it's the way that they're talking about it at the state level is that it's going to generate money for schools, and they, to a person, rolled their eyes.
right.
Like, I don't believe you. Can we just
Well,
fund the schools?
I mean, you say stablecoins are marketing tools, and I think that's certainly true in the case of Wyoming. And it brings us to the question of why are you having this crypto conference in Wyoming? I mean, Wyoming's nice, and I'm sure the resort sounds beautiful. So maybe it was just as simple as that, but I don't think it's quite that simple because Wyoming is trying to market itself as the world capital of crypto, right?
You are right. They have passed dozens and dozens of laws that are friendly to cryptocurrency. And that's on top of the business-friendly regulatory regime that they already had in place that
Mm,
really makes it a tax haven for anybody in the world to come and hide money from,
right.
collectors, relatives they don't want to give it to.
So Wyoming is trying to become this crypto capital. So this conference obviously gets held there. And I mean, tell me what this conference is like. What is it like being there amidst the crypto moguls?
I don't even know where to start, David. When you gave me this assignment and I went, I thought I just was completely wrong about everything that was going to happen. I didn't think they would let us in. They let us in. I kind of thought, okay, now we're gonna go, and we'll write kind of like a funny story about all this craziness at this big fancy conference, and it was actually so bleak. It was so depressing. And the reason I found it so depressing was because it was so beautiful, like just
Right,
the one of the most gorgeous places I've ever been in my life. Stunning. Um,
right. You tell a story about driving in from the airport. Tell that story.
oh my God,
That's the open.
well, first of all, I didn't put this in the story because I didn't really know what happened, but I met a government regulator who got off the
Oh,
same
right.
plane as I did. And this person and I were chatting, and I said, "Oh, I'm a reporter. I'm writing about this." And they were talking about how they used to regulate crypto, and now they were representing crypto companies.
Hmm.
As an attorney, and they were very friendly. And I went to the washroom really fast. Um, like they asked me to wait for them while they stopped
So
into
they
the.
could get a ride to the resort or something.
Then I
Yeah.
stopped into the washroom, and then we were both going to take the resort shuttle because this conference was running shuttles every half
Uh,
hour, I think, these Mercedes vans. And
okay.
I got out of the washroom, and he ditched.
Yeah, he just took off.
Yeah, they left
So
without me,
that
but
was
we
your
were the
first
only two
impression.
people. We were the only two people there at the time.
So that's
So
your first impression of this place is
so
like
my first
this
impression
is
was,
yeah.
but it did give me like a full 30 minutes to just kind of wander around and look at this incredible view and see the mountains. And it was a beautiful day out. It was warm. And then a flight from, I think, California came in with a bunch of people. And so we were
Okay.
all sitting in this van together.
All right.
And we're in the van driving past some of the just scenes from, cinematically beautiful scenes, gorgeous. And there were these fields where elk were jumping in to walk around with cattle. And I've never seen anything like that. And I
Hmm.
literally caught my breath and like turned to the person next to me to say, like, "Oh my God, did you see that?" Or, something like
Right.
that. Because I thought, so focused on looking out the window. I thought, well, surely everybody's looking out the window. No,
Right.
everyone was looking on their phones, and I wanted to listen to what they were saying. And it was like I I was like I could not make sense of their what they were saying and how confident they were saying it
Right.
and the content of what they were saying. It just seemed it didn't match. So the thing that caught my ear that made me like think like, okay, don't smile, don't like start laughing out loud. This is like,
Right.
listen to what they're saying. This guy said that his company was going to create a public good, and it was going to be a basket of securities that tracks inflation, which is not something anyone has thought of before. And
Mm.
I thought, like, well,
Right.
I didn't want to turn around and be like, everyone's thought of that before.
Right. Right.
But all of these guys were kind of like the way they were talking about ideas that have been around in traditional finance as if they had discovered them for the first time was
Yeah.
emblematic of how all of the crypto guys were talking. And one of the things that really stood out to me in this like, I don't know, 48 hours of weirdness was how much the traditional finance people who were there were just gritting their teeth and listening to
Right.
these folks. And it made me think of what you have talked about in your reporting, where there's this like battle between the Silicon Valley and Wall Street. And so I was
Hmm.
wondering, and I thought I would just turn the tables on this
Oh.
conversation.
Oh my
And,
goodness. Okay.
like when you were, editing my piece, like, what was going through your head in terms of that fight?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it still. Like the ink isn't even dry on the Genius Act, and community banks are trying to make changes in the implementation process. because they now realize, oh no, I mean, the stablecoins don't offer interest, so that's still a leg up that the banks have. But the way that they're put together could have a real detrimental effect, particularly on smaller banks. So there's this low level fight that's happening right now over those rules. But I mean, what you're talking about is true of tech generally. It's like when reinvented the bus, when they're like, oh, well, maybe instead of just one ride, we could just give a bunch of rides on a set schedule in a set number of locations throughout the city, and people could just get on and get off. They just reinvented the bus. So I mean, you see that in tech generally, and I think you do see it in the crypto world, where they're coming up with things that have been well established in finance for some time. So yeah, I definitely felt that kind of push and pull. And then one example of that was when you had the Fed governor who was at the conference, Michelle Bowman. She is actually the head of supervision for the kind of the financial regulatory lead at the Federal Reserve, which is one of our most important, if not the most important, financial regulator. And she's a former community banker herself. And to hear her sort of lugubriously kind of embrace crypto, and to the shrieks and cries of people in the crowd. You mentioned this one lady from something called Custodia Bank. That was, I think, a telling moment where it's like it's kind of like the regulators who kind of know better going and sort of paying tribute.
It did have that kind of sealing the deal kind of sense, the whole proceedings. And I kind of thought that, in Bowman's speech and some of the other lawmakers, it was almost like they were kind of making light of what they were up to. And the thing about, reinventing something that already exists, I think that, and this is something that someone said to me for a different story that I'm writing, hopefully finishing today, maybe Monday, um, about this exact same thing where it's the crypto industry reinventing something that exists. The point isn't to make a better version of it. The point is to slap the word blockchain or cryptocurrency on it
Right.
and say, this is why we don't fall under existing regulations and
That's
why
right.
the thing that we're making right now should just, we should just let it rip.
Yeah, that's
And
totally right.
that's
Um,
kind of what that was the sense in this conference that people were kind of like, it's no big deal, when actually it's a very big deal because it's just removing things
yeah,
that can
and
really harm
that's the
people
goal.
from
I mean,
regulation.
that's kind of the general goal is like, get outside the regulatory perimeter and then you can do whatever you want. Um,
But in terms of what the conference was like, it
yeah,
was a party. It was people were in a party mode. There were
right.
also a bunch of dogs, which I really loved because like,
Well,
there
that's
were a ton
fun,
of people brought their dogs and I got to
right?
like play with the dogs a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, and because I really want a dog. Um,
Uh-huh.
uh, but yeah, people were in celebration mode.
Yeah, I mean, you think about a conference and you think, okay, it's at, it's a bunch of people giving a bunch of speeches, et cetera. But it wasn't just that, right? There were like these activations and things.
Yeah, that's right. It was not like a financial industry conference where you go and take notes and ask questions because you are, an associate at K&L Gates and you need to know more about the 40 Act. You,
Right. Ah,
it was more like, these big personalities were kind of selling themselves on stage. They were, you know, in some instances doing some altruistic things like, talking about how digital assets can help activists who are being targeted by governments, but then they didn't mention that, well, your money can also be stolen if it's a
Right.
digital asset. It can
Right.
also be taken away. It's not like a sure thing. But
You can also forget the key or have written
yeah,
it down and thrown it away and spent 6 years. There's a guy in England right now who's like
yeah,
trying to go through dumps
yeah.
because the only evidence of what the key is that holds a bunch of Bitcoin in there is somewhere in a dump.
God,
Um,
imagine having to spend your life like that when you could just go out to lunch and make a
right,
normal amount of money. Yeah, or you could also be like kidnapped and tortured to be
right,
like
yeah, and
to
we've
give
seen a
up
lot of
your
that.
key
Hmm.
in downtown Manhattan.
Yeah, but you were at this what was it, like this cowboy barbecue or something? Tell me
Yeah.
about, take me to the barbecue.
All right, I will take you to the barbecue. It will be the best burger you've ever eaten, and
Okay,
that will be the only food available other than a couple veggies in like a little
right,
paper dish thing.
yeah.
But then also numerous drinks, just
Hmm.
like dozens of things that you can choose from to just get completely
Wasted, yeah.
blitzed. But including some local brews and including Wyoming whiskey, which I did
Hmm.
not know existed, but it did. And it was brought to a former Marine who I was talking to, and he said it was good. So, you know,
There you go.
guess that's, I don't know,
That's a good
something.
seal of approval, yeah.
Um, it was also a party. People were in high spirits. Some folks had dressed up in kind of cowboy gear. There are some spots in town that you can buy really fancy handmade cowboy hats, and a couple women had done that. Um, they
For
had
how much, and how much are we talking for one of those
I,
cowboy hats?
it was something like the low end was I don't know, 250 or something, and the high end was like $1,700.
Yeah,
Really, really
so
fancy.
$1,700 cowboy hat, yeah.
Yeah. Well, they had like, lots of flair on them.
Hmm.
Um, it was at a ranch. It was, another stunning scene. The whole party was kind of set out in this field. Um, and people were just overly confident with what they had to say to someone who identified themselves as a reporter. One person was from Silicon Valley and told me basically that he was going to get a studio apartment and rent out the address to companies that want to take advantage of Wyoming's
Uh-huh.
favorable tax law,
Right.
which is just a crazy thing to say to someone who introduces themselves as a reporter.
Right. Right.
Um,
I'm going to do crimes. I'm going to
yeah.
break the law. Right.
Um, there were some other folks there who, were just talking about how this was like a move in the direction of freedom. There were a lot of people saying a lot of like kind of just
Yeah.
really like boastful things because they were feeling themselves and it was a party and they felt like they were among friends. But the person who I was kind of the most like taken aback by, because after a while I was like, oh, these guys are just going to say a bunch of crazy stuff to me this whole time.
Right.
And so I was like expecting it. The guy who I was the most taken aback by was an official with the state who basically described to me how the ultra wealthy did not want people who they didn't want poor people to live in town. They wanted them to come and do the jobs they didn't want to do. But
Right.
they don't want poor people to live in Jackson Hole. And the reason he said that they want to keep the, median income high or whatever it was, so that there wouldn't be any slums, which
Mm.
seems like there'd maybe be other ways to resolve that without forcing people to live in Idaho and drive over a really dangerous pass during the winter.
Right.
Um, but that was a
Well, yeah, let's get into
crazy
that because one of the things you do in this piece is obviously you're at this conference. There are a bunch of, bros partying it out. And at the same time, they're talking about how great crypto is for the common person, right? That this is an element of financial inclusion. This is going to make everybody's lives better, and this is going to benefit, and particularly the Wyoming folks there are saying this is going to benefit the state. This is going to benefit poorer citizens of the state. And you contrast this with the actual experience of working in Jackson Hole, serving this clientele, which is very high net worth, and I was going to say living in Jackson Hole, but apparently not, because that's not where you live if you're working there in the hospitality industry. So tell me what it's like for people who aren't flying in on their private jet, who actually work in that city.
It is really tough. Every single person I talked to brought up the extremely high rents as the thing that was making their life the hardest. There were
Mm-hmm.
a couple people who did live in town and that, they had a two-bedroom apartment for, you know, more than $3,000 a month, which is
Mm-hmm.
more than I pay for my two-bedroom apartment in New York City. That's
Right,
that's
right,
bonkers. Um, they work constantly. It's hard to make ends meet. Um, and that cost of living crisis what is kind of it's made like more viscerally horrible because it's just you're just inundated with wealth all the time with
right,
people buying, cowboy hats for $1,700.
right,
And it seemed like the folks that I talked to were really tired, kind of like angry but resigned and just really could use a vacation. There was one
right.
person I talked to who had lived in Wyoming for a number of years, um, and he was from Mexico. He lived he lived in Idaho and drove into town at one
Right. So,
point,
so just to
but
put it in space for people, Wyoming, Jackson Hole is really kind of on the border there with Idaho, and maybe it's about an hour or so north of Montana, right? Something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
you are right.
Yeah.
That geography I can vouch for. I can't vouch for those springs you were talking about the other day though.
Ah,
Um,
ah,
uh,
ah. Anyway, that's an inside joke. Moving on. So,
Oh, but I was
yeah.
going to say this guy who had been working for more than a decade said he had never taken two consecutive days off. He sometimes
Wow.
takes one weekend day off, but he's really close to Yellowstone and he has never been there because he just
Right.
doesn't have time. And that I found that so bleak, just like
Yeah.
depressing. Like this poor guy needs some time off.
Right. And so, you contrast the kind of rhetoric of this crypto is an amazing technology and a rising tide that's going to lift all boats with the people who are sinking, who are living in Jackson Hole and trying to eke out a living there. And as you said, and you mentioned this before, but maybe we can go into it a little more, like when you approach them and say, "Hey, I hear crypto is going to make your life perfect." What are their responses?
They literally laughed out loud.
Right,
Like, they like
right,
it would just didn't it didn't rank as like something that they considered a viable option for their life in any respect.
right.
And I think that to me that sounds right. Like I think they're right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear that the way in which these this is more of a talking point than anything else. The idea that crypto is some sort of assistant of financial inclusion, or that it's going to help people throughout all income strata within society is just it's just a way to get people on board with it. It's just something that politicians can use to say, see, I'm helping out my constituents by supporting crypto.
Absolutely. And like when you try to press some of these guys who are saying that their cryptocurrency project is going to help everybody, it is immediately clear that it's not. They don't have any plan to do that. I spoke with a number of people who were, kind of holding up their company as very altruistic. And, when I just asked, like, how, like,
Mhm.
what is it
Right.
actually going to do? They didn't have an answer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not supposed to mean anything more than just mouth the words altruistic so that the congressman that you bought off can also mouth those words.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, depressing.
anyway, it's a terrific piece. I'm glad I made you go there. It's called Down and Out on the Crypto Frontier, and you can check it out at prospect.org and in our magazine where it's the cover story. I guess I could talk a little bit about the story I wrote for this new upcoming issue, which we also released this week, which has is kind of related in some ways because it has to do with the financial industry and banking. And so I'll give you a little capsule summary of it and get your reaction. So the story is about big banks and small businesses. So there's kind of a history that's a little bit rose colored, but it's generally pretty true, which is that in the olden days, small businesses really, when they needed capital, when they needed money in order to make investments or grow their business, they would turn to community lenders. And that's generally pretty true. And community lenders would have a stake in everybody doing well in the area because that would improve their deposit base. It also was because the money was not coming from some other place, but from their own shareholders. So they had a personal stake in that success. They would work directly with lenders. You would know your lender. You would know him because he sponsored the local baseball team, or you would see him down at the restaurant, and you would have that relationship, this relationship lending, that would mean that if times you had a mistake or you had tough times, which often happens with small businesses that are, I think 1 in 5 small businesses fail in a given year. So obviously, a lot of them come under tough times. And what would happen in relationship lending circumstances is that that lender would know, oh, okay, you're having a problem. Let's do a restructuring. Let's figure out a way to bridge you to a better place. That was the olden days. Now, according to Federal Reserve figures, about half of all small businesses have a large bank as their main financial services provider. And typically, those banks have headquarters that are very far away. They're basically operating this remotely. Maybe you have a local banker at a branch, but by and large, those decisions are being made either through an algorithm or some automated system, or by someone who's at the head office, who is trying to manage a million different things and doesn't have that same stake in community success, and is looking at the bottom line. And frankly, small business lending is not a big part of the portfolio of a giant money center bank that is doing trading and is doing M&A and doing all of these other things. So the idea was, well, let's look at some case studies of companies that had to deal with this situation, that were with a large bank, and how it worked. And so I had 2 case studies. One was this construction firm named Elcon that is out in the Pacific Northwest. They've been around for 40 plus years. The 2 co-founders, one guy retired. His name was Jason Decker. He retired in 2015. And he left the co-founder, Peter Williams, to run the business. Turned out Peter Williams was stricken with an early case of Parkinson's disease and was having some cognitive difficulties. And according to Jason, what this did is that collections that were normally collected in a more timely manner started to lapse. And that affected their line of credit, which they had with a big bank, a regional bank based in Cleveland called KeyBank. you'll notice that Cleveland is not Seattle. That's where KeyBank is located, but not in the community. Apparently, this Elcon company had a community lender named Columbia Bank, but they switched to KeyBank because KeyBank offered them, they basically pitched their business and offered them a better rate and better things on the line of credit. Lines of credit are very important in the construction industry because the incoming money is irregular. Sometimes you're getting your invoices all at once, and sometimes you're not getting them for a number of months. And so you need that bridge funding to get you from point A to point B. And so because of these lapses in collections, KeyBank said you violated the covenants on the loan, and you're in default, essentially. And what normally happens in the construction industry, particularly because these projects are bonded by insurance, which means that they're guaranteed. And so if a loan is called in and the bank says, okay, you owe Elcon this money, you now give it to us. The bonded insurance company will come in and say, well, no, we're the bonded company. We get that money because we have the guarantee to keep this project going. And you get a big fight, and nobody collects the money. There's a huge legal battle, and the company goes out of business. That's what would happen if you called in the loan. So normally what happens is you do a restructuring, and you do forbearance for some time until Elcon, in this case, can get the loans repaid. The Jason Decker came back into the company. He was the co-founder. He still had equity in the company. He comes back and says, okay, in about 90 days, I'm going to be able to recover as much money as possible and pay off KeyBank. I can do it. We have $250 million in incoming projects. This is a $7 million line of credit. I can get this done. And Elcon says, all right, we're not going to do restructuring yet, but we need you to give all of your financial information to this third party, all the companies you're working with, all of the outstanding invoices, give it to this third party called Huron, this consultant, and then we'll assess if you can do a restructuring.
God, my anxiety is already like up.
Right. Here we go. So they give the information to Huron. They say, we need this restructuring. There are these bonded insurance companies that are telling us we can't get other projects if we aren't guaranteed a restructure of the loan. KeyBank waits and waits and waits. Finally, Elcon, Decker, gets this money for one of its projects, $2.5 million. And it knows that it needs that money to make payroll. So it says to KeyBank, okay, if I put this money in our account, because it has a deposit account there in addition to the loan, it says, if I put this money in our account, are you just going to take it so that I have no money left to pay my workers? And, they're asking for a guarantee. Say, like, will you give us 14 days notice before you sweep the account? That way you can pay off the what you need to pay for payroll. And KeyBank says, no, we can't guarantee that at all. So Decker is like, well, what do? I got to pay my workers. Otherwise, I don't know that we're a going concern and nobody gets paid back. So I'm going to open a different account with a different bank called Umpqua Bank. And I'll do the payroll through that. So then about a month later, KeyBank calls a meeting and they say, hey, we heard about that Umpqua account. And now we're calling in the loans. And we're shutting you down. And, it was like a 5-minute conversation. Immediately, they send these notices called UCC notices to every one of Elcon's creditors, every one of Elcon's, the companies that they have invoices with. And predictably, exactly what Elcon said would happen happens. The bonding companies say, no, that's my money. There's a fight. To this day, this happened 2 years ago, the calling in the loans. To this day, I think about $300,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 in invoices, and there was like $12 million in existing invoices. Only $200,000 has been collected 2 years later, and KeyBank has spent much more than that in legal costs. So you have this company destroyed, 120 people fired. for no reason. When if there was the time that could have been taken to repay the loan to get the invoices paid off, which is like a time consuming process, then KeyBank could have been completely repaid. They are now basically have nothing repaid, if they haven't spent more money than what was due on the loan, and these guys' lives are destroyed. Side note that both Decker and Peter Williams, the co-founder, had these agreements with the bonding companies. The bonding companies could go after them personally for money that they need to finish projects. So Williams had a guarantee with KeyBank, like a personal guarantee. So he, was suffering through Parkinson's. He's declared bankruptcy and is in the midst of selling his house. Decker is also considering declaring bankruptcy because of these legal fights. It's pure destruction, and it shows a lack of understanding about the local construction industry, which is par for the course when you have a big bank that isn't really attuned to these issues, and it just shows that the death of relationship lending has this real cost on small business.
So am I right in seeing that Key Corp has a market
KeyBank,
cap of but Key Corp owns KeyBank, right?
yeah, I guess probably.
So am I right that the market cap of Key Corp is like almost $21 billion?
Yeah, and they have $180 billion in assets, right? And we're talking about a $7 million line of credit.
So
That, yeah,
what is your impression of why a bank would behave like this, behave
it
badly?
sounded it sounded very much like retaliation for opening that second account and at Umpqua Bank. And when they did that, it was almost like a fit of revenge. Like, oh yeah, you're going to open another account, we're going to shut you down. And maybe that wasn't just for Elcom, but it was for all the businesses in that community that have accounts with KeyBank to learn about that and know, oh, we can't leave these guys once we get in with them. And so maybe that's the thinking. That's speculative, but clearly, the people I talked to who were in the middle of this situation thought this is retaliatory, and maybe it had sort of this broader motive, and that's super petty, and it made no financial sense. So it's hard to find another reason other than that.
So if a small business is in that position, what recourse do they have?
Well, Decker has sued KeyBank. He's written letters to their CEO. They've at one point said, stop sending letters to our personal addresses of our board of directors because he's been doing this for like 2 years. Um, it's unclear what recourse they have because, this is a small business. Now it's a defunct business. It's not like they have an endless supply of resources to sue the bank, and it's a really, that is the point, right? Is that when banks operate in this manner, often businesses don't have a lot of recourse.
Would this be a subject that a functioning CFPB would undertake?
I'm sorry, say that again.
If the CFPB was functioning, would
Right.
this be the kind of thing that staff would undertake as a something to investigate?
Absolutely. And Decker had written a CFPB consumer complaint about this, and it just sort of went into the ether because there really is no CFPB anymore.
So what is your
I should
impression?
mention there's a second company in here, and it was a situation with Wells Fargo, but the Elcom one is really kind of the more kind of instrumental example of what breaks down when you lose, that sort of community relationship, lending relationship.
So what did you find out in the second case?
So the second case was a startup. It was a woman named Abilene Eplin who wanted to start up a merchant processing business. And this is the companies that help retail businesses process, credit card payments, basically. So they're like, part of the infrastructure of retail. And she hustled for a year. She got a contract with the largest Black-owned set of automotive groups, dealerships in the United States, 34 dealerships. She had this thing all set up. She does a bank account with Wells Fargo, basically because it's close by. And she was based in Sherman Oaks, San Fernando Valley area, California. And she has this friend in Fort Lauderdale, this guy named Ari Daniels, who is helping her by being the registered agent. He's like, if you register this in Florida, it's cheaper. And so I'll be the registered agent on your company, and we'll just do the documents there. Then he says, oh, I want to be a 50-50 owner. Now, he tells his story differently, but he basically changes his tune and says, I want the ownership. And she at first agrees to this and then changes her mind. This addendum to the organization documents, which all say she's the sole owner. There's this addendum that she has signed, but it was never filed with anybody. And there's this fight basically over the ownership that they have. Ari Daniels starts filing documents with the state of Florida saying he's the sole owner now, because she was belligerent and didn't agree to this. Excuse me. Sorry, I got a little cough. Oh. So Daniels filing these documents saying he's the sole owner. He gets into the company email, and according to Eplin and according to police reports, he goes to Wells Fargo and tries to basically commandeer the account. Oh. And Wells Fargo, even though the application, she's the sole owner, and every documentation, she is seen as the owner. Wells Fargo is like, all right, it says in Florida, at least today, it says in Florida that you're the owner, so we'll give you the account. And they block her from the account. Now, the account has money for the startup of going to these auto dealerships and setting up the merchant processing. It's basically training. It's like it's money for travel and travel costs and the equipment and all of the various things you need to do this business. And it was in the form of a loan that this woman, Abilene, got from her mother. So all this money is now stuck. And she can't fulfill the contract if she doesn't have the capital, which is tied up in this weird, messy ownership dispute. And so she has to cancel the contract and basically dissolve the business. And this happened a year ago, February. It's now September of 2025. This happened in February of 2024. She still hasn't gotten that money out of the account. Wells Fargo has held on to it. They say they have an investigation going. And she has gone there. At one point, they said, oh, you never sent us any documentation to show that you're the owner of the account. She's like, I certainly did. I did immediately after this whole question came up. She went back to the banker at Wells Fargo at the branch and said, didn't I send you all that information? He's like, yeah, and I submitted it to the portal and I'll submit it again. And so she's in this dispute with the bank, and the bank keeps saying, okay, we'll give you back the money. And then they never do. And then at one point they said, okay, we'll give you back the money if you indemnify us, and we'll give you $1,000 for your trouble, which was just kind of like a nuisance thing. So yeah, here's another example where this was a relationship lending situation. She could go to the banker who she knew and say, yeah, I'm having this messy situation with the ownership. I can change the LLC to a different incorporation. Can I get my money? And the banker might say, yeah, okay, I understand what's going on. You've given me the proper documentation. Let's make this happen. Instead, it gets fed into this huge bureaucracy at Wells Fargo, and it's still under wraps. And as a result, the business is gone.
So for somebody who wants to start a small business now,
Mm-hmm.
what do these two cases illustrate about what you got to be prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it says, you still want to try to find a local lender. It may be cheaper or less time consuming to go to a big bank for your small business needs. But this is the downside. These are the hazards. These are the dangers of getting into that, because you end up filtering up in this big bureaucracy that doesn't know your personal circumstance, that might not be there to help you if you get into a hurdle. And whereas it might be more costly, it might be more time consuming, it might be a bit of a hurdle on the front end to go with a local lender. But on the back end, you have someone who might have your back. You might have someone who you can trust more, and who's willing to work something out with you if you do get into trouble. So I think that's kind of what we're talking about. Of course, those options are fewer and fewer now. In the 1980s, we had something like 15,000 banks in the US. Now we have less than 4,000. And this is shrinking by the day, as I think something like 60% of all assets under management at banks, depository institutions in the United States are with the top six banks. We're in a very different situation than we were in, the 1960s and 70s, maybe.
As you were talking and reading your story, the thing that keeps coming to mind is this conversation I had with a pharmacist for another assignment for the next issue, where he told this story about a father and a son who were both given a similar drug regime for a
Uh-huh.
hereditary illness. Dad has a local pharmacy, and so when his insurance said, "Oh, we can't cover this," the pharmacist had the time, because they knew each other, to say, "Okay, well, here's your options for generic stuff that we could move you to." And so he got the medicine that he needed, and he could afford it. The kid went to a CVS.
Mm-hmm.
He also could not afford the drug,
Mm-hmm.
but nobody could help him get onto something that was cheaper and generic, and he died.
Mm.
And to me, it seems like this, it's a different industry, but we're talking about the same kind of just, these massive institutions that have so much control over our well-being. And there's just, there's no safety net
Yeah,
for anybody who doesn't just have the most straightforward case.
absolutely. We talk about the situation with monopolies or concentration in the US economy. Too often we talk about it solely in terms of price. And it is true, if you are a monopoly company, you have the ability to raise prices because you have a certain market power that a more competitive industry would not. However, what we lose when we just talk solely about price is what you're talking about: arbitrary coercion, control, those kinds of things.
So, I see that we are running low on time, but I would love it if you gotta get some water, man. This
I got 2 minutes. I'm
the
good.
cough that's going around our distributed staff is
I
like
know.
really bad. Um, uh, what do you see any kind of glimmers of hope anywhere in this kind of, you know, just super concentrated approach to industry across industries?
I mean, the hope is that we know how to fix it. And we are on the road to doing that during the Biden administration, when we had an FTC and a DOJ antitrust division that was really concerned with breaking up concentrations of power. The problem is that antitrust laws take a long time to work through the legal system, and that more time was needed in order to get that regime in place and entrenched. There are certainly anti-monopoly laws that go beyond antitrust, regulatory laws, and there was some trouble doing that within the scope of Congress because it was so tightly controlled or tightly divided. So, it's going to take more time. But the problem, the reality is, we know how to do it. This isn't rocket science. Like, we know how to break up these companies, and I think that spirit is going to be animating. I've certainly talked to people, who are running in the next election, who are running on these issues, and I think it's going to be really important. I mean, we've seen just in the last week, right, that concentrations of media ownership lead to censorship concerns. That's not a price situation. That's not a price issue, but it's an issue of arbitrary coercion and democracy and our basic freedoms. So I think these issues are going to get more and more salient, and as a result, we hopefully will go back to those that ancient wisdom, those other laws and regulations that we know can work. Well, we are out of time, and I'm about to lose my entire throat here. So I want to thank you, Whitney Wimbish, Whitney Curry Wimbish, with the American Prospect, staff writer. Thank you for your story and your continued work. We do this every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. Tell your friends. We will put this on the website at prospect.org, and you can check it out over the weekend. And I hope you'll be back next week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Bye, everybody.